Welcome in to the Bonesville Pregame Podcast. Al Myatt joined by Kevin Monroe. Kevin, of course, great defensive back in his playing days at East Carolina, culminating in 1999 with that illustrious team. And Kevin was in the press box with the Pirate Radio Network on Saturday night as the East Carolina Pirates took on Brigham Young. And the Cougars, with a 34-13 win, they've moved into the top 25 this week on the bottom rung there. But Kevin, a thorough victory for Brigham Young. We talked earlier. They're not really overwhelmingly talented, but very solid. Didn't beat themselves. East Carolina had two very costly turnovers late in the first half.
Yeah, Al, it was a frustrating game to call simply because East Carolina was in it the entire first half, trading field goals, keeping BYU out of the end zone, even though they weren't necessarily able to put it in the end zone themselves. They were keeping BYU out of the end zone, and they looked pretty impressive, especially on defense, because this is a Brigham Young team that had been able to run the ball on everybody. They were averaging 312 yards rushing for their first two games. And so East Carolina was really, holding LJ Martin down and not letting Bachmeier get going. And just the costly turnovers, you're driving in down 6-3 with the opportunity to take the lead with a touchdown or tie it with a field goal. Hauser scrambling to his right. He's got the opportunity to either run and get a few yards, or try to find somebody in the end zone. He tries to make the pass, throws an interception, huge interception. It keeps you from getting at least 3 points. And then, we have a muffed punt down at the other end. That was a costly mistake. The ball ends up on the 1 yard line. You've got 59 seconds to go. BYU has one timeout. East Carolina's really got no shot at taking the ball all the way downfield unless they get lucky and bust a run or something. But we're staying on the air. Just get under center, quarterback sneak it, give yourself a little bit of room, make them use their last timeout, and then take a knee or quarterback sneak it again if you need more room. They come out in the shotgun, and I'm thinking, dear Lord, what are they about to do? And as all the Pirate fans saw, he checks to a hitch route, and the corner there was almost like he was in the huddle, and he jumped that route and got the pick six. And that to me made all the difference. I think that changed the entire game. I think it changed the way people felt about the Pirates' opportunities, and it even showed because several Pirate fans left at halftime. Now a lot of them were students, and you know how that goes. They wanted to go out and have a good time or whatever. But that touchdown just before half, I think, just changed the whole complexity of the football game. And so, obviously, they still were in it 13-3, starting the third quarter, but they never really recovered from that.
You're right. That was a big momentum killer, and not the right call. Credit to Evan Johnson with the 2 picks for BYU.
Yeah, there's no doubt. He's Big 12 player. Making plays when they needed him to. The offense at that point had not scored a touchdown, and so he found a way to get them into the end zone. And so, very impressive by him.
I think Nick Maggie had a good night for the Pirates.
Yeah, I mean, he had the first field goal, to get the game within 3. And then in the second half, had some opportunities. It's good to have people that you can count on to come through in the clutch. And not sure what happened after week 1 when he was replaced by Conrad, but since then it seems like he's been the guy, and they feel confident in him, and they look like they're ready to move forward with him.
Kevin, short week. And first American Conference contest Thursday night against Army. Same deal for both teams. The cadets will have to travel. And once again, national exposure. Different personnel for Army than last year. I think Caton Hauser made his first start last year at Army, if I recall. And so they don't have Bryson Daly, and he was kind of a do-it-all guy. But that's going to be a huge matchup in terms of bouncing back and getting started in the right manner in the conference schedule.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out Army. I mean, they lost their first game to Tarleton State, who I'd not even heard of before. And then they come back and go on the road and beat Kansas State, which, obviously a big-time opponent. Probably not as good as they've been in the past. But to win that game, and then you flip it and they come back and play a solid North Texas team, and that thing goes down to the wire. They end up losing. But hard to figure out Army so far. We know their talent, their ability. You mentioned the quarterback from last year has moved on, and he was unbelievable. I think he had 5 touchdowns against the Pirates last year or something like that. Short week, you never want to play one of the service academies on a short week, but I can promise you the Pirates have had some opportunities in the preseason and also in the weeks leading up to this game to spend 30 minutes or an hour here and there going up against that Army offense just so they'd be ready for it on the short week. So I don't have a problem with thinking they'll be ready. We all know Blake Harrell came from a couple different places that ran the triple option, so he knows a lot about it. Coach Aldridge has also had a stop or two with triple option experience, exposure. So I think they'll be ready. And it'll be just a much different Army team they faced a year ago. They'll be favored. The Pirates will be favored in this game, and they were definitely not favored last year. So and a lot to prove, right? Because you play so well in the first half of this past game, and then it all falls apart in the second half. So have a short week after a loss is a good thing to get that loss that taste out of your mouth.
Kevin, I'm sure you've played against some option teams. And talk a little bit about, it's assignment football. You've got to play the personnel you're assigned to.
Yeah, we played Army almost every year. Never got a chance to play Navy, but we definitely played Army several times in my career. Never lost to them, but it was always a struggle, especially as a defensive back, right? Because your first responsibility as a defensive back is a pass. And so you sit back there. Sometimes they don't put any receivers out wide, or sometimes they're just one. And you're responsible for making sure that guy doesn't go out for a pass. And then every play he's coming at you, trying to block you and keep you away from the running backs. And so Tim Rose, our defense coordinator, used to say, you better put on 2 chin straps this week because you're going to do some tackling. That's just kind of how it was. Everybody has an assignment. Everybody has somewhere they're supposed to be, and you can't veer off of that. And so if you're the defensive end and you've got quarterback, just because he fakes the pitch to the pitch man, you don't go for that fake. You stay on that quarterback and you tackle him to the ground. If you're a linebacker and you've got the dive man, you stay right there on that dive man. Don't worry about anything else going on in the backfield. If you're a safety or a corner and you got the pitch guy or the outside linebacker got the pitch guy, then that's your responsibility. You don't worry about the quarterback cutting it up. That's everybody else's responsibility. So if everybody plays assignment football, does what they're supposed to do, then nothing's going to pop. But it's so hard when you see the quarterback run around the edge, 5 times in a row, and you're like, I can get him, and then all of a sudden they hand it off to the dive man. He goes right where you were supposed to be. So you don't play your assignments, it'll kill you. And for the guys in the back end, they're averaging 100 yards passing a game. So every now and then they'll pull that ball out and throw a pass. And so everybody has to play assignment alignment football. And if you don't, they'll beat you.
As you say, you played against Army. I remember the 99 team. I think they went to 5-0 with a win at West Point. Very scenic place for a football game. Not so enjoyable for the Pirates last year. And there's probably enough personnel at East Carolina that they recall that game last year, and they can build on that in terms of correcting mistakes and preparing for Thursday night's game.
Yeah, I mean, especially defensively, nothing seemed to go right defensively last year. And, mentally and physically they were, I'll say more mentally. Mentally they were prepared for it, but physically they just seemed to get blown off the ball. They weren't getting to their assigned spots, and the quarterback just was relentless with his speed and power. And when he did pitch it, the running backs and the fullbacks did well also. So, Yeah, there's definitely enough guys around that saw what happened. But last year's game was it was as bad as it gets in terms of facing that offense. And so you got to believe they'll be much better this year.
Last week's game precipitated a coaching change. And East Carolina had lost on the road to Charlotte the week before, I believe, and went to Army. The powers that be promoted Blake Harrell as interim coach, and the Pirates finished very strong in 2024. That game coming up Thursday night, Kevin, national television, ESPN. They played on ESPN2 Saturday night, but you're competing with games on other networks on a Saturday slot. And this is college football on Thursday night nationwide for East Carolina. So an opportunity for redemption and great exposure for the Pirates.
Yeah, last year in that Charlotte game, this is a game you go into it. Charlotte and East Carolina were both, predicted to be kind of towards the bottom of the conference at the end of the year. And Charlotte just put it on. They had that freshman quarterback that came in and just played so well and threw the ball all over the field. And East Carolina just found it hard to stop them. That was kind of the thing that started Mike Houston's demise. And then you go to Army the very next week and get pummeled. And I think that was the nail in the coffin. And so you bring in Blake Harrell as the interim, and as you mentioned, he goes on a run. And it's just been playing so well. I think under him, probably this BYU second half is probably the worst half of football they've played. And I don't know that they played all that bad. They just played up against a good opponent that didn't allow East Carolina to make mistakes. And when they made mistakes, they punished them for it. So, yeah, it'll be Thursday night game. Hopefully another nice crowd. It's tough on Thursday nights, right, because you got school next day for the little ones and families. But hopefully you can get the students in there. And a lot of students, we talked about earlier, they were kind of leaving early in the game, but I'm sure they've heard that enough by now, so hopefully that won't happen anymore. But it was probably the biggest crowd we've had in a few years, and it was fun to see that. And so to have back-to-back games, kind of night games in Dowdy-Ficklen will be really cool. So I hope we get a good turnout.
2-2 at this point going into the conference schedule, and East Carolina has not lost to a team that they were not favored against. So they've kind of lived up to expectations at this point. And you mentioned that you think they'll be favored over Army on Thursday night. But in this game coming up, Kevin, the unique kind of offense that Army will present, and hopefully a good crowd to support the Pirates, and that opportunity for redemption. Army is kind of an unusual situation in college football. They are not paying nil money. They don't accept transfers. And so they don't have that extensive roster makeover potentially every year. If you see a guy as a sophomore, chances are you'll see him as a junior. Right. And that's kind of the situation that their program has. East Carolina, on the other hand, they've made some valuable additions. They've lost some good players, but it is what it is. You have that roster makeover just about every year now.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I actually didn't know that about Army in terms of not doing any NIL and not accepting transfers, but it makes sense. These academies, they have a bigger goal in mind, right? They're building soldiers. And so, they don't have time for guys coming and going. I know they let them kind of choose after a year or two if they're committed to doing their armed services commitment. After graduation, they decide that pretty early on. But after that, I mean, you're in it, right? And so, and then they have lots of strict mandates, right? You can't be but so big. You have to be in shape to make your PT. Your all the physical things that they put you through to get you ready to be a soldier. You have to be able to do all of that. And so they generally, they're not going to have the offensive line and defensive line that BYU had. And that was definitely the decider in the game is that BYU was averaging about 6'5", 6'6", well over 300 pounds on their offensive line. The defensive line was big as well. Not that the Pirates don't have big guys. They absolutely do. But they've not faced an offensive line that big in a long time. And so Army's a completely different game. They will have smaller guys, shorter guys. They move. They pull a lot of people, a lot of offensive linemen. And so they go off of action and movement and fakes. And it's not about just blowing you off the ball. So we'll see how the Pirates are able to handle it. But a completely different opponent in the Black Knights than it was against Brigham Young.
And another factor is that Army does not redshirt, so they don't tell a young man, come and play for us, and we'll let you develop and play 5 years for us. So they're on a strict schedule as far as getting toward graduation and getting into the military duty there. Well, Kevin, no Bryson Daly to worry about this year, but one thing about Army, they're very coachable guys, very disciplined, and they will present a lot of the same elements that they did last year. They may not have that leader on offense that they had last year, but let's talk about that Bonesville tradition, Kevin's keys to the game.
Yeah, Dwayne Coleman is a quarterback this year. He's attempted 23 passes through 3 games, which is not a whole lot, but he's had some success. He's thrown a long of 68 yards. He's at about a 56% clip, passing the football. And so you'd like your quarterback to be over 60%. That's not what they do. They like to run. And they've got, 6 or 7 running backs, fullbacks, they call them, that are averaging over 4 yards a carry. So let's just start there. You have to be able to control and stop the run. They're averaging 300 yards a game rushing, just like BYU was. And the Pirates did a pretty good job, at least in the first half, probably through 3 quarters of stopping that run. They've got to come in and stop the run. It starts with Coleman, who's that quarterback, running the quarterback keeper, but also that dive man, that pitch man. You have to be in the right spots. We talked about alignment and assignment football. The Pirates have to win up front and be able to stop the run, or this is a non-starter. They won't have a chance, and they'll see what they saw against Bailey last year. So that's where it's going to start. Offensively, the Pirates, only put the ball in the end zone once this past weekend. They've got to be better than that. They've got to find a way to move the chains, keep this Army offense off the field, but get that running game going. So you're going to see tons of runs from Army side of the field. East Carolina was better this week versus BYU. Montgomery had a 39-yard rush. He ended up averaging 7 yards a carry. They ended up well over 100 yards rushing for the game. That's the type of offense they've got to have, type of running game they've got to have, but better against Army. So stopping the run defensively, getting the run going offensively, and then taking care of the football. I didn't think I had to have this conversation about Caden Hauser in the past. He's been so good. He only had 1 turnover coming into this game. But you cannot afford against an opponent that you are fairly equal to in the conference and turn the football over. You've got to find a way to take care of the ball. The 2 interceptions before halftime, that'll get you beat. So they've got to find a way to take care of the football, both through the air and on the ground. They can do those things. They can beat Army.
Very good. And we'll see how things unfold Thursday night. And Kevin will be on the Pirate Radio Network with his insights. And Kevin, I look forward to talking with you next week on the Bonesville Pregame Podcast.
Appreciate it, Al.